All right, all right, all right. Yeah. Okay, we're back doing a little bit of reflection on the sit down that I had with my brother Ben. He's an incredible guy. I've known him for a long time. We've really come a long way together. And, he touched on a lot of good things. He touched on facing his fears, and, I kind of do that every day in some form or another. And it's difficult to do on your own. Typically, we got to do it with other people involved, and as a community of human beings who, are riddled with fear or maybe anxiety or something like that, or just like, just being uncomfortable on this earth sometimes, and being uncomfortable with the fact that we can really succeed, and not just succeed in getting accomplishing things. Accomplishments and success, I think, are not really the same thing all the time. But success is being happy where you are. Accomplishments are maybe you working towards goals and things like that, and whatever motivates you in order to level up in your life. And the only level up that really matters is how secure I feel with where I am, with who I am, with how I'm behaving, and basically how I feel. That's why this is like the spiritual experience. It's a spiritual program that should be a spiritual life that we all try and lead, because it's all about the feelings. There's plenty of times in my life where I had all of the bells and whistles and all of the toys and that kind of stuff, and I had the right outfit on, the right costume on, and I felt like a fraud. Like I felt like shit, I felt like the great I am, and I really, it really wasn't that substantive. But over time, I really, I can honestly say that, I'm somebody with, an semblance of integrity and self-respect, and I'm very, very not perfect, but I'm on my way, and I'm proud of myself. And some of the things that I struggle with is that, everybody's on their own path and on their own journey, and they're all going at their own pace. And I have a lot of uncomfortable, maybe, expectations of other people. But, I have to remember when, I was, a little bit at a time going at my own pace, and that kind of stuff, it needs to be put in front of me, so that way I can deal with the frustration. Like, when I call my sponsor, typically I check in, every couple of days, just so he knows my temperature and knows what's going on in my life, and with my friends and that sort of stuff. But typically when I have like a resentment, or I'm angry at somebody, or I'm offended at somebody or whatever, it's really about, first thing he always says, he's so funny, this freaking guy. He says, Jared, please tell me, what did they do to you? Tell me. He's an Israeli guy. He's incredible. And after I tell him my tale of woe, he's always like, okay, so number one, look who's talking. That's number one. Look who's talking, And I have to remind myself, and that's what happens with the inventory that we're talking about in recovery, when they say, oh, you got to take inventory and these other things. So people who are not in the rooms, maybe who are listening to this kind of stuff, and they don't understand what the step work is, and it's really it's an analysis of your life, and it's an analysis of your attitudes and your behaviors, and why you maybe are a repeat offender of the same thing over and over again. So the inventory we're talking about, the first one, is in the fourth step. The fourth step is it's a real one, and if you do it out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever, I'm sure there's some places you can find some sheets, and if somebody typically would show you how to do this kind of inventory, it would really take you from walking to driving in your life, as far as a kind of analysis that you can do and whatever. So what the inventory does is basically put everything in its rightful place. The inventory is where I have a sheet of paper, and I separate the paper into 4 columns, and in the first column I put, people or places or things or institutions that I have a resentment towards. So let's just say, I'll say maybe something I probably mentioned it on another another show, but I have like the resentment towards a kid that stole my headphones in the 7th grade. His name is Pierre. So I have resentment towards Pierre, and now he would go in the first column. The second column is what did he do, right? So Pierre stole my headphones from my locker at Kaki at junior high school. Third column is what did it affect? And they give you a list of options that you can choose. And, if I'm doing this off the top of my head, so basically it affected my sense of security, my personal relations with other people, even my sexual relations, maybe because, I felt like a punk or a sissy or something because I let somebody get over on me, and then maybe it spilled over into confidence or lack thereof in those situations, or finding out that maybe I am a fraud, that I have this costume on that I'm this like tough kid or whatever, and I'm really not, which I knew that, I already knew that deep down inside already, but that's for another tale. And that would be in the third column. The fourth column is basically what is my role in this situation. My role in what happened sometimes is just me being there. The other part was, is it possible that maybe my attitudes and my behavior have brought some of this out of somebody else? Is that possible? Maybe or maybe not. I don't know what his motivations were, but I can tell you this, that I carried that resentment and those feelings with me most of my life. And, when I found myself feeling those things again in another situation, let me tell you, it would be almost automatic where, oh no, this happened already once and you don't want to feel like this again. So now you're going to have to man up and you're going to have to, handle your business in whatever way possible. And it's not really it doesn't mean a physical confrontation or those kinds of things, but anytime that I felt threatened in those kind of ways where I thought somebody was getting over on me, this is where that came from. So what would I do? I would act out in aggressive ways, energy, intimidate people, maybe with my poorly timed sense of humor, or AKA the sneak dissing, or, being a wise ass, or just insulting people, or just having really a bad, basically ruining the moment. That's what I would do. When in reality, it's only my perception, in the future part of this whole scenario of what's going on. And I probably wasn't threatened like that as many times as I believed that I was. So this inventory, when you do these things, and I had pages and pages and pages of people, places, and things that, allowed me to see that, dude, I really carried this bag of shit around my whole life, and I've been whipping people with it, all based out of fear of things that have maybe happened or that I perceived to have happened at one point or another in my life. And, it was an eye-opening experience to really have that laid out in front of you. And then just say, okay, look, man, like I don't have to protect myself from everybody and everything anymore because people aren't going to steal my headphones. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm a bozo, but I don't really have to have my guard all the way up fully with guns blazing. Like if you ever cross me, then I'll have a vendetta towards you for the rest of my life, which is kind of how I used to feel. I was just walking around with this energy and this on my spirit. I was really even without a drink or a drug. I mean, the drinking and drugs were numbing me to these feelings most of my life. And this is just a feeling of anger or resentment or whatever. Forget about feeling of joy or lust or love or stuff that, alcohol and drugs basically just poured water all over that kind of thing too. So, when you first start to live this life, man, you're just like Ben said, you're stark raving sober. You're really raw. And it's not easy to get over the first few hurdles of this is who I am. And if I'm going to stay on this planet and I'm going to live this life unadulterated with substances, and it just means but like they say, life on life's terms, like I'm going to have to, learn how to manipulate myself to become comfortable in these situations. And it was funny because like I was thinking about talking about this over the weekend where like, the same day, no, a few days before I sat down with Ben, like I went to a meeting that my friend, he runs in Bay Ridge. And I was a few weeks late because I was supposed to go on my anniversary, but I was working and there was all this other shit that was going on and I couldn't make it. And, I front on this guy all the time and I feel bad and I let him know like last minute, like not last minute, well, same day as last minute in adult life. So I was like, but I couldn't make it because I had all these other situations that were going on, and it just basically me going and pontificating at an AA meeting on my 18-year anniversary about the great I am, or just sharing my joy for the day. It wasn't in the cards for that day. It couldn't happen. I had some other pressing stuff going on with work and with my home, and I told you my kid just went upstate, and we had all this other shit. So anyway, I happened to be able to be free on this past Friday, so I went. And as soon as I get there, and this is like a very like meat and potatoes kind of meeting, it's in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn. And, I get there and, there's so many things going on in the news before the meeting, right? It's so funny because like they talk about, I almost named this show, it Outside Issues, because like when you show up at a meeting, you really, we're talking about putting in some work so we can become better people, more loving, caring, tolerant, so that way we don't have to pick up a drink or a drug and we can show up as our best selves everywhere that we can go. And if we are not showing up as our best selves, it's not going to be because of drinking and drugs. It's going to be because, sometimes you're just a piece of shit. So, but, most people, they adhere to not really talking about politics or about, not so much religion or whatever inside the rooms, because it's a nice place to kind of strip all of that stuff down and just be a human. But before the meeting and after the meeting, all of that stuff is like, depending on which meeting you go to. So anyway, so I'm in this, I show up downstairs and they have like, they have like the New York Post like on the table, and there's these guys and these older gentlemen and these women, and they're letting it fucking fly. They're like, because, they're signing a new law or something, or bringing back some kind of police shit in New York City. I don't know if it's stop and frisk. I don't know if it's, I think it might have been like the gun suppression squad, which I knew peripherally, some people who did that kind of work. And some of that stuff really helps out. A lot of it does. Even though I kind of have a love-hate relationship with authority and police officers in general. But, some of that stuff goes over the line too, because everybody's a human being. So like, this one lady, she was there, man, oh my God. And she was like, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say middle-aged, because maybe I'm middle-aged, I'm 42, but this lady, she had at least 10 years on me. Maybe 10 or 15 years on me, and she just looked like a miserable fuck. And she was in there, and she was yelling and pointing fingers, and they start talking about, like, the criminals, they let them out all over the street, blah, blah, blah. And all those BLM people, they need to be charged as terrorists for making those kind of threats, and this is our new mayor, blah, blah, blah. And she's just, like, going fucking, all in her feelings, man. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, like, you don't even know who's in this room or how anybody else feels about what you're saying, and you're in here, like, and which is fine. Like, you're allowed to be like that, I guess. I mean, apparently you're allowed. Yeah, she's allowed to have her own opinion. And then this other guy chimes in, like, what if I wrote a nasty letter to Reverend Al Sharpton, then I'd be a fucking racist and blah, blah, blah. But these BLM guys, they could threaten, Eric Adams, and then they're okay. And, all these people that, like, and this is, we're having, like, whatever, tea and whatever before the meeting. And they're sitting there going through their feelings. And I guess they're just riddled with all this fear and all this. They feel threatened by somebody else's opinion, that whatever it is, whether it's a BLM or like, a MAGA, I mean, obviously, like, dude, if if they had any balls, they would have put the MAGA hats on and just wore them in a meeting. And that's okay, too. They're allowed. Listen, I have plenty of friends on all sides of this issue and every issue, you know, because I don't really subscribe to one frame of mind. But just the intolerance of other people's right to have their own place, you know, was funny. And then I was just like, wow, this lady, like, she's pretty fucking angry, you know? And I was like, she's walking around with that, like, you know, like a blood vessel was going to pop out of her fucking eye, you know? And none of this affects, in my theory, I'm over here judging them, but I'm like, dude, does this affect your personal life, your day in any way? Like, or are you able to be this angry and this upset and then walk around the rest of your day like Mary Poppins or something? Like, none of this shit exists. If you are, then you're better than me. Like, I got to steer clear of that level of, like, what this guy was what Ben was talking about, the bedevilments. I got to steer clear of that shit because it's basically a runaway train of self-righteousness, you know, where I know and all of this other stuff. And I don't fucking know anything, you know. I don't know what it's like to be a police officer, you know. I don't know what it's like to be a person of color on the wrong side of the law. You know, I don't know what any of that stuff is like, you know, so I don't disregard anybody else's, you know, interpretation of what's going on in their life. But I'm definitely not going to sit here and make a judgment on some shit that I don't know. Like this, you know, unless maybe her son is a cop or something. I don't know. Either way, so she's like going bonkers, and then the other guys are in there, they're chiming in, and it's like a big echo chamber of shit, you know. So me, being the infinite wisdom person that I am, and this other shit that was happening too, it's kind of like a little bit of I wouldn't say a controversy, but it kind of highlights the humanity, you know, that people are human inside the program. So in our preamble, it says, like, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women, and then it goes on to blah, blah, blah. It tells you what AA is and what AA is not. So in the last year, you know, we have like all these, the way AA works is like basically almost like a big pyramid. Like, nobody's in charge. Like every group is allowed to vote and on issues and things like that. Each group is autonomous. It's actually really good. You know, it's a really good program that way. You know, we don't take outside money and whatever. Nobody really is in charge. But who's in charge is the collective vote of the group conscious or whatever. So point is that they changed the preamble to help include you know, trans people or people who don't identify as a specific gender. And so now in all of AA, if they're following this tradition, which has been voted on and passed, that it will say Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people, not just men and women. They found it to be more inclusive for trans people or people who don't identify. If they want to get clean and sober, that they can come in, they're allowed to. Nobody said they weren't allowed, but whatever. This is the world that we live in, and this is how we're going now. And I think what's more funny to me is watching all of these, you know, bead rubbing, yoga, spiritual meditation giants getting completely, like, they're losing their shit over the change in the verbiage. I'm like, yo, you're in here talking about God and about AA, and you have this new life and you do all this shit, but this one word is so offensive to you that you have to have, like, you know, maybe they obviously need to do an inventory on why they feel so threatened. Because then what they do is that it turns into a runaway train of like, oh, well, they changed one thing in the program, now they're going to change all this other stuff, and now people are not going to be able to get sober, because what else are they going to change? Are they going to say now that the Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people and animals? Is that the next thing? Like, you know, they go down this rabbit hole of self-righteousness and anything to, like, make themselves feel better about, you know, feeling and thinking less of other people. When the truth is I am not a trans person. So those words don't fucking bother me. You know, it's a word that has nothing to do with my life. Similar to when they're like, but BLM is a terrorist organization. Like every time I hear that kind of shit, I'm like, bro, are you even in BLM? Do you know anything? Do you know? I'm not in Antifa. I don't know. So I'm definitely not going to, just speculate based on all of the shit that they read online, which is, how we get into these messes in the first place. You go down the hallway of, how can I have my own hate and fear be co-signed? And most of the stuff is fiction in the sense, I'm not saying any of these things don't happen in real life, but they're not happening in my life. And as somebody who wants to walk this earth as a loving, caring human being, that I can really be impactful. Like, if it's not happening personally in my life, I'm not saying it doesn't happen on earth, but I need to just focus on that. Because here's the thing, man. I have plenty of brothers and sisters on this earth who belong to, all of those groups. And I have, over time, found a way to love them. Even if I don't agree with them, like, who the hell agrees with everything that anybody says? I talk about this, sometimes, like, I had a laugh with my spouse. I'm like, dude, I don't even agree with everything you fucking say, but this is what part that makes us human. Like, we don't have to subscribe to every single thing. So when I got up there and after I'm thinking, about all this stuff, and I'm like, let me just, like, spray the corner with some spiritual stuff. So I was sure in my qualification to mention, not very specifically, but in the vein of, like, why do I find myself so disturbed by just words? It's just a word. And then what happened was it was funny because my friend that opened up the meeting, he was, he maybe being defiant, or maybe he just wanted to play to the crowd. He made it very, on purpose. Like, he was like, Alcoholics Anonymous is the fellowship of men and women, and, to get the hoopla. And I thought that was just like, hey, man, if that's who you want to be, then you're allowed to be that person, but just know who you are, know who you are. And, so I made sure when I got up there, I just said, everybody's allowed their space in whatever way that I could say it, without, pushing those buttons, but kind of showing them a mirror of, like, listen, like, we're in an AA meeting at 1:00 on a Friday. All of us allegedly have been in the grips of alcohol, drugs, gambling, whatever, self-destructive, crazy, insane lives. And the truth is that we have an opportunity to have a second life. Hopefully it will be one where we're spending our time loving other people, even if we don't like them, but just not having that kind of energy, because the energy doesn't dissipate. If I'm thinking about, how the Hasidic Jew bus drivers across the street from my shop pretend to be friendly with me and park their buses on the sidewalk and all over the street, and then I can't find parking, blah, blah, blah. If I spend my time in that cycle of anger, like, it doesn't go away. I'm going to go inside somebody's house to do some kind of work, or I'm going to go into a restaurant and I'm going to be nasty, and I don't have to say or do anything. I just have to be there stewing in that stuff, because I don't really know how to let that kind of shit go. So I try my best to not live in that space. And that was kind of like the crux of what I said. And when I go into programs and I speak, I typically don't really prepare. I don't really get a kick out of telling my own story. Like, I could talk to, everybody for days and months about drinking stories and, how crazy it was and how fun it was and how, all this other, a drunkalogue is what they call it. And yeah, but I don't want to waste my time it, it's not that I don't like glorifying it or whatever. Like, listen, I had 2 DWIs before my 21st birthday, and if I got one more, it was going to be a felony. And I still drank and drove with my son in the back seat of the car in his little car seat. That's where the disease of alcoholism took me, that I could not drive without drinking. Even now to this day, I always have to have something to drink in the car. It's a force of habit, whether it's energy drinks or coffee or bottled water or whatever. So, but I don't really like, so it's easier for me when I get up there and I speak, if we're speaking on something very specific, like, how to do particular step work or what kind of spiritual practice I have and all this other shit. So, like, just getting up there and telling my stories, I kind of felt like, I'm going to use this time wisely and let some of these people know that I understand why you're so upset and, maybe why you feel threatened, because there were times, like I said, I felt threatened with Pierre, and you're running around with that same kind of shit, because living in Bay Ridge, there ain't no BLM over there. We have a great, wonderful, large Arab community, and they also are involved in the police department. And it's like a very, like, parts of it, are maybe liberal, but it's still very Republican and conservative and whatever. And that stuff is okay too. It's okay. So, like, these people are not, there ain't no BLM protests going down Fifth Avenue in Bay Ridge. Like, that's not happening. So I don't know why they're so up in arms about it and why they spend their life, or who knows, maybe just portions of their life in that shit storm. So that was nice to kind of like just, be able to share that kind of philosophy with them. And then I got really good feedback from them, and I let everybody know, like, my opinions, meaning that, most of us are on our best behavior inside the meeting, because you want to be known, I guess, in recovery as like an AA, spiritual person, for the fact that you think people are judging you, they're judging your sobriety. But meanwhile, 2 minutes before the meeting, you're hollering borderline prejudice and racial tones, and I don't, that's nowhere in our program. That kind of life is nowhere in the big book, It doesn't mean you got to love everybody. It doesn't mean anything, but it just means that, you just got to be cool and stay in your lane. And one of the things that really helps me with that is that I learned how to tend to the garden that I can touch. And that's what I mean. Like, as if it's not going on in my personal life, like, that's happening in my life every day, like, that's where I need to focus on my attitude and my behavior and what's going on every day. I was watching a few hours of the testimony for the kid in Wisconsin that, he went out there with his gun and people ended up dead. And, I don't want to, it was weird. I didn't want to hear the prosecution question this guy, only because like that was like so long. So, not the defense or whatever. When he was up there and he's crying and all this other shit. And, the other thing is, so I'm listening to, the prosecution, the questioning this kid for 3 hours. And I've never been on a stand for that amount of time. The longest I was ever on a witness stand was maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, and I was shitting a brick, and I was like maybe 14 years old. Was I 14 or 15? 8th or 9th grade, there was a stolen car involved. And that kind of stuff. And it was very intimidating. But either way, so this kid, he's a young kid, and, whatever was going through his life or his mind, he went out there with a rifle. And, I can identify with being that lost. You know, you're going to have to pay what you owe. And some people lost their lives. And that fucking sucks. And I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. All I can do is speculate. But I know that maybe in those scenarios, my opinion is like where, you know, where could he have possibly thought any different at 18 years old? You know, thinking, you know, being trapped in that hamster wheel, like as threatened as this 58-year-old freaking lady, you know, that he's got to go out there and he's got to show them and he's got to do something. And then he gets out there and then eventually, you know, a couple of people, maybe they pull his card and he had to prove to himself how, whether he was about that life or he wasn't. And that's the thing that I identify with. You know, I know what it's like to be in that position where I got to tell myself, like I said, Pierre with the headphones. I had that instantaneous conversation with myself many, many times. And in an instant, and it's fear, and it's self-righteousness, and it's like, I don't have all the information. It's all this other stuff that leads to, it never leads to a good place. You know, thank God, thank the Lord, man, that I never, you know, rang that bell as severely as this kid rang. But, you know, drinking and driving with your kid is pretty severe, and I definitely could have ran people over and killed people and hurt people and that kind of stuff, and I was just very lucky that I didn't. But I don't think that I'm in at any place better than this kid is. You know, I just think maybe I got lucky and I made a few different choices and the wind blew a different direction, and here I am, you know, because I've been definitely, you know, drunk with self-righteousness, with anger, with resentment, and, you know, with, like, I'm never, you know, I'm not getting what I'm owed and that kind of stuff. So, you know, this is us. This is life. And I wouldn't be shocked if this kid gets off, you know, like, I wasn't shocked that Zimmerman got off, you know, the system in this country is just what it is. You know, it's just what it is. And hopefully, I don't know if the system can't change without humans changing, without us changing, you know, and without some vulnerability that I always talk about. And I don't have the answers. I don't know how it could happen. You know, I don't know how it could happen. I'm just happy that, you know, that it wasn't my kid that was out there. And I pray for that kid's family. You know, if that kid ever wakes up one day and realizes what the fuck he did, and I pray for all the victims, you know, on both sides. And, you know, we got to find a way to love each other and how to be together, you know, in order for us to really to win. So anyway, I want to thank my boy Ben. You know, I love him a lot. And, you know, he's somebody, he's my brother on this earth. And we don't agree on everything. And that's what makes him my brother. You know, that's what makes him my brother. Because we can still sit down and chop it up and enjoy each other's company. And we can laugh at our differences. And I can listen to him and he can listen to me. And it doesn't mean either one of us has to change. But it's possible that neither one of us has, you know, all of the information and all of the answers. And we're both just trying to be better humans. So that's it. Spiritual experience. Jay Lewis signing off, humans. Love you all. Peace.